News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Preeti Kaur. Coming up in the next 1 hour. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets Qatari counterpart in Doha. Discusses ways to boost the ties between the two nations. To meet Amir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad today. Israel vows more action against Hamas in Rafah amid global calls for restraint. Launches deadly airstrikes in Lebanon in retaliation to Hezbollah rocket fire that killed an Israeli soldier. India and England gear up for the third test match in Rajkot today. Huge milestones to look forward to for Ashwin, Anderson and Stokes. On the second leg of his West Asia tour, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi reached Qatar. Prime Minister received a warm welcome by the large number of Indian diaspora in Doha. Prime Minister reciprocated the warm greetings he received by the excited Indians there. This is the second visit of the Prime Minister to Qatar, and we see him receive a warm welcome. And this is one aspect of the Prime Minister's tours abroad, that he receives warm welcome by the Indians who are settled in those respective countries. And the enthusiasm is palpable here to see their leader in front of their eyes. And here we see Prime Minister reciprocating the greetings he is receiving on his arrival in Doha. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani. Discussions covered expanding bilateral cooperation in sectors such as trade and investment, energy, finance, among others, were also held during the meeting. Later in the day, Prime Minister Modi will hold a bilateral meeting with Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad, the Emir of Qatar, and key dignitaries there. This will be Prime Minister's second visit to Qatar. As a global fintech leader, India leads in terms of all real-time payments made worldwide. With the launch of UPI transactions in Sri Lanka and Mauritius by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, it is hoped that this would revolutionize the digital transactions in these countries as well. Presence of UPI will not only allow Indian tourists ease in transacting in the Indian rupee, but also make it hassle-free by removing the need for converting money to hard currencies. DD India's correspondent Ahmed Muin Farooqi reports.
With the launch of Unified Payments Interface in Sri Lanka and its linkage with Lanka Pay or Lanka QR, the Indian tourists would directly be allowed to use UPI in Sri Lanka, just like they have been using it in India. Indian nationals would now be allowed to make payments in Indian rupees on UPI-enabled apps, which will directly get credited into the merchant establishment accounts in Lankan rupees. Let's have a feel of the payment experience in one of these shops. So I am inside one of these shops and I will be using my Bheem app. We have a UPI branding that has been placed here that shows that the Lanka QR will accept UPI payments as well. The money has been sent. So I'm right now at one of the most hustling and bustling places in Colombo, the Colombo Business District. We will have a look at how UPI can be used for making transactions here as well. So I'm in one of these merchant establishments who are accepting UPI payments. Again, I'll be trying my Beam app and making a small transaction. And the transaction is through.
The Supreme Court of India on Thursday will deliver the verdict on petitions challenging the validity of the electoral bond scheme of political funding. A 5-judge constitution bench headed by Chief Justice of India D.Y. Chandrachud and comprising of justices will rule on the legal sanctity of the electoral bond scheme ahead of the general elections in India. Last year, on November 2nd, the court reserved its judgment in the matter. India's Anti-Money Laundering Agency Enforcement Directorate has issued a 6th summon to Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal in a money laundering probe related to irregularities in the Delhi excise policy case. Now, the agency has summoned Kejriwal to join the investigation on February 19th. The 6th summon comes days after a Delhi court, acting on the complaint filed by Enforcement Directorate, directed Kejriwal to appear before it on February 17th. The court noted that prima facie, the AAP chief was legally bound to comply. Let's take a look at other stories making it to the headlines from across India now. Indian Coast Guard offshore patrol vessel Varaha makes port call at Maputo Port, Mozambique, as the part of ongoing strategic overseas deployment to East Africa. During the 3-day visit, the crew of the vessel Varaha will participate in a series of professional interactions with the Mozambique naval forces. A massive fire broke out in the storage house of the Jute Corporation of India Limited in India's Assam. Authorities said that there is no report of any casualty in the fire incident. The firefighters have reached the spot and have brought the fire under control. India's Union Railway Minister Ashwini Vaishnav inspected development work of Puri railway station in Indian state of Odisha. The new station building will be ready for devotees at Puri with all modern facilities soon. After the inspection, the minister also offered prayers at Jagannath Puri temple. A 5-day karate club in collaboration with Wildlife and Nature Trials and Himalayan Sports and Cultural Development Organization concluded in India's Ladakh. The martial art camp was organized for locals to boost the aspirants to remain physically, mentally and spiritually fit in the harsh climatic conditions. To hold simultaneous elections in India, One Nation, One Election committee members interacted with leading economists of the country. A paper co-authored by former chairman of 15th Finance Commission, N.K. Singh, presented to the high-level committee. The paper brought out that there are wider economic ramifications of holding back-to-back elections in addition to repetitive expenses. More support for Ukraine is at the top of the agenda for NATO defense ministers during their meeting in Brussels. The 31-nation military alliance says it is focusing on increasing defense spending and providing more ammunition to Ukraine. DD India's correspondent Ishan Garg gets us more details from Brussels.
Mobilizing more support for Ukraine. That's the message from the NATO here. The Secretary General of the 31-nation military alliance says that the bloc is going to move towards procuring more ammunition for Ukraine. He says in the short term, the group is relying on its own stockpile and purchases from other nations. But in the long term, Stoltenberg says countries will have to ramp up their defense production to meet Ukraine's demands as it enters the 3rd year of its war with Russia.
In the past few months, NATO has agreed contracts worth $10 billion. And just this week, Germany launched construction of a new ammunition factory in Lower Saxony. At full capacity, it will produce around 200,000 artillery shells per year.
This message of solidarity was front and center when NATO members and 24 other partners who make up the Ukraine Defense Contact Group held a meeting on Wednesday. Another meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council is taking place on Thursday. These ministerial meetings are setting the stage for a NATO summit in Washington later this year. But they also come at a time when members of the bloc have been criticized by US presidential hopeful Donald Trump for not spending enough on their own defense. There are concerns in Brussels that the US could pull support from NATO if Trump wins the presidency in November. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says those comments undermine the bloc's commitment to common defense, and he expects the US's support to continue, not only for the sake of Europe's security, but also for America's own defenses. He says countries are spending more money as they have agreed to invest $380 billion just this year. That's 11% higher than last year and accounts for nearly 2% of the total GDP of the NATO countries, even though countries are not individually hitting that 2% GDP target. Ishan Garg in Brussels, reporting for DD India.
Ukraine claims to have sunk a Russian landing warship, the Caesar Kanikov, off the coast of occupied Crimea in an operation with naval drones. Ukrainian military intelligence released a video on Wednesday that it said showed several naval drones approaching a large vessel at night and at least one large explosion. Ukraine's GUR military intelligence agency said the warship appeared to have been loaded when it sank and that people before the attack, it had spent some 10 days at a loading site used by the Russian military. The Project 775 warship, one of Russia's newest vessels, has a crew of 87 and took part in wars in Georgia, Syria and Ukraine. Indonesian Defence Minister Prabowo Subianto has claimed victory in a presidential election on Wednesday after unofficial vote counts showed him with huge lead among his opponents and on course for a single-round win. Crucially, Prabowo has the tacit backing of the outgoing president Joko Widodo in the elections. Also, presidential contender Anies Baswedan said that he would respect the final election result but called on his supporters to monitor the official tally of votes by the Election Commission. Millions of people cast their ballots in the country's presidential, national and provincial elections on Wednesday. However, heavy rains and flooding forced the election authority to delay polls in Demak Regency in central Java. Israel vowed to continue with a powerful operation in Gaza's Rafah, even as calls mounted for it to hold off sending troops into the territory's overcrowded far southern city. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is under growing international pressure to hold off the conflict, gave no indication as to when the offensive might take place or where the hundreds of thousands of people now crammed into Rafah might go. His comments came a day after talks in Cairo on a possible ceasefire and the handover of hostages held by Hamas ended inconclusively, stoking fear among the displaced Palestinians that Israel would soon storm Rafah, which abuts Egypt. Earlier, Netanyahu said that Israel will fight until complete victory, and this includes a powerful action in Rafah as well. Israel also carried out extensive airstrikes on villages across southern Lebanon on Wednesday in response to a deadly rocket attack on northern Israel by Hezbollah. Hezbollah and Israeli military have been exchanging fire along the Israel-Lebanon border for more than 4 months now after the Lebanese armed group launched rockets across the disputed frontier. Hezbollah did not announce any operations on Wednesday. The head of its executive council said that Israel's attacks into Lebanese territory on Wednesday cannot pass without a response. An Israeli government spokesperson told journalists that rocket barrages from Lebanon on Wednesday morning had left one Israeli woman soldier dead and another 8 hospitalized. The government reiterated that Israel is not interested in a war on 2 fronts, but if provoked, they will respond forcefully. A quick break ahead, but still to come on this edition of DD India News Hour. Demonstrations intensify in Pakistan against the election results. Rejecting Trump's concern over Biden's growing age, Russian President Putin calls President Biden more experienced and predictable. It's love all around. New way to celebrate love in Times Square to mark Valentine's Day.
India that invents. India that innovates. India that excites. India that invites. Land of possibilities. Teeming with opportunities. Watch India Ideas each Thursday, 8 p.m. only on DD India.
Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India News Hour. And let's go back to our top story. The Prime Minister is in Qatar, and the bilateral relationship between India and Qatar has been steadily growing. And that includes a comprehensive span, including political ties, trade and investment linkages, strong energy partnership, and ties in the field of culture, education, and security. Up next, a detailed report.
On the second leg of his West Asia visit, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi reached Qatar. This will be his second visit to the nation. Prime Minister Modi had last visited Qatar in 2016. Amir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, had paid a state visit to India in March 2015. Prime Minister Modi met the Amir during the COP28 summit at Dubai in December 2023. The two leaders also met on the sidelines of UN General Assembly 2023, which marked 50 years of India-Qatar diplomatic relations. Bilateral trade and investment between Qatar and India during financial year 2022-23 was pegged at $20 billion. Qatari investment in India stood at over $1.5 billion last year. Indian investment in Qatar has been over $450 million. Over 15,000 Indian companies operate in Qatar. Qatar is also the largest supplier of LNG to India, accounting for over 48% of India's global LNG procurement. India regularly participates in the biennial Doha International Maritime Defence Exhibition and Conference (DIMDEX) in Qatar. The second edition of bilateral exercise Zair al-Bahar was held in August 2021. Indian naval and coast guard ships regularly visit Qatar, highlighting the cultural connect between the two countries and engaging with the Indian diaspora. Over 800,000 Indian nationals reside in Qatar, forming one of the largest expat communities of Indians abroad. Year 2019 was also celebrated as India-Qatar Year of Culture. In the wake of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav celebrations, a 3-day cultural festival, Passage to India, was held in March 2023 in Qatar. Indian Sports Centre in Doha made it to the Guinness World Record for conducting a yoga session with maximum number of nationalities. The Indian Cultural Centre organizes cultural events and activities in Qatar. The visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Qatar is expected to further deepen the India-Qatar partnership.
All right, to get more on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit, we have with us Meghna Dev. Meghna, good morning. Now, this is Prime Minister's second visit to Qatar. Help us understand what all will be taken up in the bilateral meetings he will be holding today, and what all are the areas of concern that will be taken up on the agenda.
Preeti, we know that last night Prime Minister Narendra Modi reached Qatar, and he did get a very warm welcome from the Indian diaspora in Doha, and besides that, obviously he held a meeting with the Prime Minister of Qatar, where there were different areas of cooperation discussed, and besides that there was also a discussion on the developments in West Asia and how they are impacting the region. So this was a very important meeting that Prime Minister had last night, and also very importantly today there is a bilateral meeting with the Emir of Qatar, which is an important meeting as well, because this is going to obviously talk about areas of cooperation, regional and global concerns, and more, because we also know that both the leaders did meet on the sidelines of the COP28 last year, and the recent development when we are talking about the 8 ex-naval veterans being released from Qatari jail definitely brings up the significance of this visit. Besides that, also when we see that last year India and Qatar did celebrate 50 years of diplomatic relationship, this is also a very important time to reassess and reevaluate the cooperation that India and Qatar already enjoy. enjoy in terms of economy, energy, obviously, trying to figure out new areas of cooperation where both the countries can cooperate. But very importantly, a lot of emphasis and a lot of cooperation between India and Qatar has been in the energy sector, which holds more promise. And this time around also, as we saw in the India Energy Week, there was a long-term contract for a sale and purchase of LNG signed, recently. So that, the LNG part definitely in terms of the energy cooperation holds a lot of promise in terms of discussions also, and would feature, probably in the discussions between both the leaders as well.
All right, Meghna, also we've just shown a detailed report of how the relationship has strengthened over the years. Now also we recently saw before the visit of the Prime Minister how the Indian naval personnel had been released in Qatar, their death sentence had been commuted, and that spoke volumes of how the relationship between the two countries. Help us understand over the years, how has the relationship evolved and blossomed under the leadership of the two countries?
Very importantly, if we see that this was a big diplomatic win for India when we are talking about the release of these 8 ex-Navy personnel who were given death sentence. After that, the death sentence was commuted. There was an appeal filed, and after all the diplomatic effort that was put in to get these people released, it definitely is a big win that India registered in terms of when India tells that they will take care of every Indian who is stranded or in trouble abroad. This definitely is one of the important cases where we can see, and it's a testament to what kind of approach India has for its nationals who are living abroad. Besides, when we definitely see this Al Dahra case was one of a very important cases, because these naval veterans did spend over 500 days in jail, and besides that, a number of petitions were filed, bail was not granted, it was consular access was given a number of times. The External Affairs Minister also met the family of the veterans. So all of the efforts had been put in constantly, time and again. Appeal was filed, in the court of first instance, from the Court of Appeal. All efforts in all directions were being put in so that the release of these, veterans be ensured. And that definitely did register a very important diplomatic win for India. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi visiting Qatar at this point of time definitely is, makes it even more significant. Besides, keeping this case aside, very importantly, economic cooperation is also one of the important aspects between both the countries. When we actually see, and we just saw the report where it did state that 15,000 Indian companies are there in Qatar. That is a huge amount, as well as we have 800,000 Indian nationals, more than 800,000 Indian nationals who are there, which is the largest expatriate community living in Qatar. Besides, we also do participate in the DIMDEX exercise, which is a defense, DIMDEX conference, which is a maritime exhibition and conference, which is organized. So we definitely have a lot of cooperation. Last year, we celebrated 50 years of our diplomatic relationship. We saw Prime Minister Narendra Modi did visit Qatar in 2016, and the Emir of Qatar was here in 2015. Vice President did visit Qatar in 2022. So there has been, we can say, visits of senior officials and high-level ministers as well to Qatar. But it makes it even more significant when Prime Minister Narendra Modi visits Qatar to obviously take a stock of where the bilateral cooperation stands as of now and how it can be taken forward with Qatar. And this visit definitely is important, though it's a very short visit, because Prime Minister Narendra Modi did land yesterday. He already held a meeting and he has another bilateral with the Emir of Qatar today itself.
All right, Meghna, we leave it there. Thank you for joining in with those details. So the Prime Minister will be holding bilateral talks with the leadership of Qatar today. And this is the second visit of the Prime Minister to Qatar. We'll keep you posted. Meanwhile, let's turn focus to other updates. Intensifying this week's demonstrations against election results in Pakistan, protesters gathered in Quetta, the provincial capital of Balochistan, for a sit-in-stir on Wednesday. Workers and supporters of different political parties blocked all the main highways linking Balochistan with other provinces in the protest against what they alleged was rigging of votes. Shops and public transport services in Quetta came to a standstill as local political parties called for a total shutdown. A political stalemate continues in Pakistan after an inconclusive election that ended with Shehbaz Sharif chosen to continue leading the country. Efforts were underway to get the second largest party to join the government to ensure stability. The new government could also face new political tensions with independent members of parliament backed by jailed former Premier Imran Khan, forming the largest group in the legislature. PMLN has nominated its president Shehbaz Sharif as the prime ministerial candidate of Pakistan instead of the party chief and three-time former Premier Nawaz Sharif. His daughter Maryam Nawaz is the party nominee for the post of Chief Minister of Punjab province. Take a look at this detailed report.
Pakistan is a polity pulling in different directions held together by the glue of convenience, not quite connivance. A coalition of PMLN and PPP with Shehbaz Sharif as a candidate for Prime Minister.
Now, when the parliament is about to come into existence, our war will be against the challenges facing this country. The first and number one challenge is to make our economy stand on its feet. This challenge itself is like a Himalaya.
However, the co-chairman of the PPP, former President Asif Ali Zardari, expects former Premier Imran Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf to be part of the reconciliation process. Could this be because his party has just 54 seats in the House and is hoping to piggy bank on the collective strength of PTI-affiliated independents? Or could all parties be looking at a democratic revival through olive branch politics?
We have to do reconciliation, and PTI is part of this reconciliation. We don't want that PTI is not part of this reconciliation. Every political force should be part of reconciliation.
The elections have raised more questions than answers. Supporters of Imran Khan believe the system was rigged from the start. Surely their votes could count for something. They voted for a candidate who wasn't even allowed to contest. What does that say of a free and fair system?
No, I'm not the only one who is disappointed. The entire nation is dismayed. Everyone is upset and everyone is feeling let down because all the agencies and other government people started hounding the person that the entire nation has selected. Imran Khan is the only one who can make this nation better. No one else can do it.
The caretaker government, which presided over the elections, is convinced that it did its job without fear or favour. This despite major world powers doubting the veracity of the poll process.
If we have to investigate, if we have to inquire, we will not that do on the demand of either United States or United Kingdom or EU. We have got our own procedures. We are a sovereign country. We have got our own laws.
All said and done, Shehbaz Sharif has the backing of his brother, former Premier Nawaz Sharif. Together, the PMLN and PPP account for 134 seats, a simple majority in the 264-seat legislature. Their coalition would also apply across the provinces, with Nawaz's daughter Maryam likely to be Chief Minister of the influential Punjab province. Bureau Report, DD India.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that Joe Biden would be a better US president for Russia than Donald Trump and dismissed concerns over his counterpart's age and acuity for the role. Asked in a state television interview to choose between Biden and Trump, Putin said that the US leader was more experienced and predictable, adding that Russia would work with any US leader who wins the trust of the American people. The Russian president's comments came a day after Biden accused Trump of having bowed down to a Russian dictator as he urged Republicans in Congress to defy Trump and back more funding for Ukraine. Let's take a look at other stories making it to the headlines from across the world now. Toby Marlowe and Lucy Moss, the British composing team behind the hit musical Six, have launched their latest interpretation of the relationships on Valentine's Day. The musical, which won multiple awards, premiered at the Edinburgh Fringe and was transferred to Broadway. Valentine's Day was celebrated with several couples getting engaged and married at Times Square. An ice sculpture was the centerpiece, which will be up for views in Times Square until the weather permits. On February 14, people in Paris's 9th arrondissement visited a flower shop to buy Valentine's Day bouquets. The Lily of the Valley shop, adorned with heart cutouts, remained the best seller, with roses being the symbol of the day. Despite rising European inflation, the shop expects a 10% increase in sales this year. Paris is a popular destination for couples. A quick break ahead, but after the break, devastating wildfires tear across large parts of Chile, country's deadliest on record. Dramatic dash cam footage showed mounds of earth slipped down a hill and across a road in Turkey. Scaffolding around Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris is starting to be removed, revealing the newly installed spire. Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India News Hour. A quick relook at the top stories once again. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets Qatari counterpart in Doha, discusses ways to boost ties between the two nations. To meet Amir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad today. Israel vows more action against Hamas in Rafah amid global calls for restraint. Launches deadly airstrikes on Lebanon in retaliation to Hezbollah rocket fire that killed an Israeli soldier. India and England gear up for the third test match in Rajkot today. Huge milestones to look forward to for Ashwin, Anderson and Stokes. Unhinged. That's how Nikki Haley described Donald Trump on Wednesday as the war of words continues between the two Republicans vying to become the party's nominee for U.S. presidentship. Haley, the former ambassador to the United Nations, took to the airwaves to lambast her ex-boss over disparaging comments the former president made about her husband, who is serving in the American military. In the past hours, Trump hit back in a rally in South Carolina ahead of next weekend's primary vote, which he's expected to win. Our U.S. correspondent Benji Haya gets us the details.
So then, certainly no love lost on Valentine's Day between the presidential candidates as the race heats up in South Carolina, where early voting is already underway. A win there would put Donald Trump firmly on course to be the Republican Party's nominee to take on Joe Biden again for the White House, and it would likely end Nikki Haley's campaign. She's come behind Trump in all the other primary votes in this process to decide the nominee. And as former South Carolina governor, a defeat in her own home state would be hard to recover from. Initially shy of attacking Trump, Haley's finally turned fire in his direction, claiming only she can be the one to beat Biden. And she's joined several fellow Republicans in criticising Trump's remarks made last weekend, when he said that his administration wouldn't defend some Western allies in the NATO alliance if they hadn't paid enough in defence and they came under attack. But She says she will still support Trump if he is the Republican candidate, though she cast doubt on whether the American people would vote for a convicted criminal. Trump, of course, faces 91 criminal charges under 4 indictments, most in relation to his alleged mishandling of classified documents and attempts to overturn the 2020 election that he lost. That trial for that was scheduled for early March, but it's been postponed. Benji Haya in Washington, reporting for DD India.
A New York judge is set to determine the trial date for the first criminal case against Donald Trump. His presence is expected at the hearing, where the judge will also address Trump's motion to dismiss the case. Now, this decision is highly anticipated and will have significant implications. DD India's William Denslow gets us updates from New York.
Donald Trump faces 34 felony counts tied to allegations that he made hush money payments to a porn star during his 2016 race to the White House. The man, expected to be a key witness, former fixer Michael Cohen, paid Stormy Daniels $130,000 ahead of the election, and prosecutors claim that Trump reimbursed Cohen by falsely claiming the money to be a legal expense. Trump denies the charges, and his legal team have called for a Manhattan judge to dismiss the case outright. If he doesn't, Justice Juan Merchan is expected to decide when the case, currently bookmarked for March 25th, will go to trial. Meanwhile, on Thursday, a judge in the state of Georgia will hold a hearing relating to misconduct claims against a prosecutor in Trump's election interference case. District Attorney Fani Willis is accused of having an improper relationship with the special counsel in the case, whom she appointed. And on Friday, a separate Manhattan judge is expected to make a ruling in the civil case against Trump, who's accused of inflating the value of his assets for favourable lending terms. Judge Arthur Engoron has found Trump liable for fraud, and New York prosecutors are seeking around $370 million in penalties and to bar him from running a business in the state. The former president says these cases against him are a politically motivated witch hunt. William Denslow in New York, reporting for DD India.
Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese voted in favour of a motion in Parliament's lower house on Wednesday, calling for the return of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to Australia. The motion, moved by independent lawmaker Andrew Wilkie, was passed with 86 votes in favour and 42 against after it was supported by the Labour government. Most members of the Conservative opposition coalition opposed the motion. US officials are looking to extradite Assange from a British prison to the US, where he is wanted on criminal charges over WikiLeaks' release of confidential US military records and diplomatic cables. Britain has given the go-ahead for his extradition, but Assange, an Australian citizen, has filed a possible final legal challenge to stop it. A public hearing will take place on February 20th and 21st, when 2 judges will review an earlier ruling that had refused Assange permission to appeal. The scaffolding around Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris is starting to be removed, revealing the newly installed spire for the first time since a fire ravaged the historic Paris landmark 5 years ago. It is an emotional unveiling for some, a symbol of strength and resilience. DD India's correspondent Tony Waterman gets us more from Paris.
For the millions of people that visit Notre Dame Cathedral every year, there hasn't been much to see since 2019. Large barriers like this block the entire entrance, and parts of the building are still obscured by scaffolding. But now that is slowly being peeled away. The new spire, which had been protected by 70,000 pieces of scaffolding, is now visible. And at the top sits a golden rooster and cross. The bird has flaming wings, which is meant to symbolize a phoenix rising from the ashes in much the same way this famed cathedral is doing after a devastating inferno ripped through the attic 5 years ago. Tens of millions of people around the world watched in real time as the 19th century spire toppled over, engulfed in flames. And now many gather here to see its recreation restored to its rightful place.
It's so beautiful to see it up. All the really hard work that was going on, all the special people, the specialists that sort of worked on the organs, on the construction. It was amazing.
It's still unknown exactly what sparked the blaze. Investigators believe either a cigarette or a short circuit in the electrical system, but whatever the cause, officials are taking precautions against history repeating itself. A sprinkler system has been installed right below the spire. Now, the scaffolding will continue to be removed in the coming weeks, providing the first glimpses of what the restored part of the cathedral will look like. The building itself is slated to reopen on December 8th, but it could take an additional 40 years before this iconic landmark is fully restored. Tony Waterman in Paris, France, reporting for DD India.
In Hungary, 100 people gathered in front of the presidential and prime minister's office in Budapest on Wednesday evening, protesting against Viktor Orban's government after a presidential pardon scandal that risks damaging the core appeal of Orban's Fidesz. Now, two of Orban's key political allies, President Katalin Novak and former Justice Minister Judith Varga, were brought down by the scandal within a week. Veteran Conservative Prime Minister Orban has sought to defuse the scandal by submitting a constitutional amendment to the parliament last week, depriving the president of the right to pardon crimes committed against children. Novak resigned 2 days later, but Orban hasn't spoken publicly since Thursday and has made no comment at all on the two resignations. Representatives of several human rights organizations in Venezuela have held a press conference demanding the immediate release of a prominent attorney and activist detained last week. They expressed concern on Wednesday over Rocio San Miguel's well-being and condemned her inability to access legal representation of her choice. San Miguel is a vocal critic of President Nicolas Maduro's government. She has been accused by the Prosecutor General, who is a close ally of President Maduro, of involvement in an alleged plot to kill the president. She and 5 of her relatives, who have also been detained, are being held at undisclosed locations. New York City gets hit by heavy snowfall as a winter storm hammered the northeastern United States, causing traffic disruptions in the city and prompting public schools to move their classes to the online mode. The winter storm also prompted Westchester County in New York State to declare a local state of emergency. The heavy snowfall hampered visibility in New York, leading the government to enforce reduced speeds for drivers on highways. The impact of the winter storm has extended beyond New York, affecting various states in the northeastern United States. Data indicated that the storm has caused power outages for more than 100,000 of homes and businesses in the northeastern region. A series of heavy snowfall grips Massachusetts. Dashcam video captured the moment an ambulance swerved to avoiding colliding with a vehicle rolling towards it on Wednesday. The ambulance was traveling to Peabody, transporting a patient to a hospital in Boston, when it spotted the car rolling towards it. The patient in the ambulance arrived safely at the hospital. All right, from one video footage to another, dramatic dashcam footage showed vehicles reversing to escape a landslide near a gold mine in eastern Turkey as mounds of earth slipped down a hill and across a road. Rescue workers battled to find 9 workers trapped under the earth after a landslide at a gold mine in eastern Turkey on Wednesday. The incident sparked a plunge of more than 50% in its Toronto-listed shares. Families in the fire-hit Chile reconstructed the houses they lost in the deadly fires that have taken the lives of 132 in central Chile. Chile's government said over 7,100 houses have to be rebuilt with an estimated overall enterprise cost of around $742 billion to buffer the pain Veena Del Mar local government has set up an assistance centre where victims can get from garments to veterinary services while reconstruction works are on the way. Mexican animal rights activists have called for a ban on bullfights in Mexico City as the spectacle returns to the city. Demonstrators dressed in makeshift banderillas and red protested outside Congress, demanding lawmakers ban the centuries-old spectacle. The protesters plan to file an injunction against bullfighting as the city held its first bullfight in almost 2 years. A gunfire incident occurred outside a landmark railroad station in Kansas City, Missouri, where the Kansas City Chiefs were celebrating their Super Bowl victory. One person was killed and around 15 people were wounded, including several children. Police Chief Stacey Graves confirmed 2 armed individuals were in custody. The incident occurred near Union Station, where the parade and celebration were taking place. Around 800 law enforcement officers were present at the rally and the parade. Children's Mercy Kansas City received patients and invited parents to contact the medical center if their child might be in their care. A vehicle drove into the emergency department of St. David's North Austin Medical Center in Austin, Texas, killing 1 person and injuring 5 others, including 2 children. Now, according to local officials, the motorist was treated at the hospital but was pronounced dead on the scene. Austin officials said they believed the incident appeared to be an accident, with the motorist driving into the ER. There are no indications the crash was an intentional act, a city official told local media. A short break ahead, but after the break, Rohit Sharma to lead India at the Men's T20 World Cup in US and West Indies. Spectacular lantern show, Spring Festival night celebrations in China. Japan's economy slips into a recession as it unexpectedly shrank for 2 straight quarters on the weak domestic demand.
Voice of a rising aspirational world. Stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. Embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India News Hour. Up next, we get to updates from the world of business. US stocks closed higher on Wednesday, bouncing back after hotter than expected inflation data drove a sell-off and dashed hopes for interest rate cuts in early spring. Calm is setting in after the surprise consumer inflation print spooked the market. Investors are coming into grips with the prospect of the Federal Reserve holding off on rate cuts until later in the year and a potential no landing for the US economy. The Dow Jones Industrial Average moved up 0.4% after the index suffered a 500-point slide on Tuesday, a worst since March 2022. The S&P 500 rose almost 1%, gaining 47.45 points and ended at 5,000.62, while the Nasdaq Composite ended 203.55, moving up by 1.3% to 15,859.15. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.4%, gaining 151.52 points to 38,424. Japan's economy has slipped into a recession as it unexpectedly shrank for 2 straight quarters on weak domestic demand, raising uncertainty about the central bank's plans to exit its ultra-easy policy sometime this year. The weak performance saw Japan lose its title as the world's 3rd largest economy, replaced by Germany. The GDP fell an annualized 0.4% in the October-December period after a 3.3% slump in the previous quarter. The result compared with a median market forecast of 1.4% increase. 2 consecutive quarters of contraction are typically considered the definition of a recession. All right, after business, we now turn focus to sports. Hosts India will play England in the third test match at Saurashtra Cricket Association Stadium in Rajkot from Thursday. After India's remarkable comeback in the second test at Vizag, the series is well poised for an interesting show for the remainder of the series.
After a long break, both India and England are pumped up as they are all set to lock horns for the third test to be played at the western city of Rajkot from Thursday. India made a remarkable comeback in the second test at Vizag after a shock loss in the first test at Hyderabad to get on level footing, leaving the 5-match series perfectly poised. The brilliance of Yashasvi Jaiswal and Jasprit Bumrah allowed India to make a comeback in the series, but concerns remain over a misfiring middle order, which will now be relying on the young talent to deliver the goods. India will need to be ruthless and tactful in equal measure while dealing with an unpredictable England who surprised them with their outstanding bowling in the fourth innings of the first test. Skipper Rohit Sharma's form with the bat before the 8-day break only added to the growing concern surrounding the Indian batting, which will be without KL Rahul in this game and Virat Kohli. Rahul's unavailability for the third test has put forth the possibility of Mumbai batter Sarfraz Khan getting his long-awaited debut in the longest format. The domestic run machine could be teaming up with one-test-old Rajat Patidar to occupy two of the most coveted batting spots in the middle order. India's glaring inexperience in the middle order would have been well noted by the English camp, whose robust research on opponents and aggressive play has time and again delivered results. Wicketkeeper K.S. Bharat's persistent failures with the bat has raised the possibility of India turning to Uttar Pradesh's 23-year-old Dhruv Jurel, who is known for his aggressive batting. Ravindra Jadeja is making steady progress in training after a hamstring injury, and the experienced all-rounder can also make a comeback in the playing 11.
And still with cricket, Rohit Sharma is set to lead Team India in the upcoming 2020 World Cup in June. Hardik Pandya will be the vice-captain. The announcement by the BCCI secretary ends days of suspense surrounding the leadership for the global event in the Caribbean and the US. Rohit played for India's T20 side for the first time since the T20 World Cup semi-final in 2022 when he turned out for the home T20 series against Afghanistan. Defeat, a red card and another night of disappointment. In UEFA Champions League, Bayern Munich are beaten 1-0 at Lazio. Ciro Immobile's penalty gave Lazio a shock win over German giants Bayern Munich. Immobile scored from the spot midway through the second half after Dayot Upamecano was sent off for a foul on Gustav Isaacson. Bayern, despite a star-studded attack featuring Harry Kane, were unable to respond in an underwhelming display. It was the second defeat in 5 days for Bayern, increasing the pressure on manager Thomas Tuchel. Nevertheless, Bayern must improve in order to progress from the last 16 for the 12th time in their past 13 attempts. Kylian Mbappe made a triumphant return from injury. He ignited Paris Saint-Germain's Champions League last 16 clash against Real Sociedad with a crucial goal. Despite PSG's historic struggles in the competition, Mbappe's timely strike injected momentum into their campaign. Having missed his side's previous match with an ankle problem, Mbappe scored at the back post after a corner. Bradley Barcola added the second with a lovely finish past goalkeeper Alex Ramiro. With the victory, PSG edged closer to Champions League glory, a feat that has eluded them so far in their storied history. Spring Festival night celebrations in China include spectacular lantern shows. Now, these events showcase the rich history and diversity of China's traditional culture with over 150 light displays from 15 provinces. The festival has gained international recognition since the 1980s, attracting interest from around the world. All right, that's it in this edition of DD India News Hour. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and also Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Preeti Kaur signing off, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.